next step that we wanted to go through, and again, reminder, do please jump in with questions, or if you have questions that you want to address later, throw them in the chat. The next bucket then that we looked into was cloud and cloudification and programmability. And similar to data exploitation, we've got the 2x2 here, where on the y-axis we've got intra-domain versus cross-domain. But in terms of technical maturity, here we're looking at how softwareized is the network versus how programmable is the network. And when we talk about programmability, we're very much thinking about the flexibility in the network, kind of the software skills. So not just is the network virtualized, but am I managing the network in a software-driven culture? And have I moved more towards this idea of flexible, cloud native, etc. And what we see as step one is a big shift within domains, within the access network, within the core, within specific functions, towards a more software-driven network. And that, of course, is epitomized by virtualization, where a significant portion of the core network and IT may start to move towards virtualized infrastructure. I think RAN, user plane may be slightly further down the line, but generally we're seeing the majority of at least planned deployments, including virtualized infrastructure. The next step for us, or the second step here, was in disaggregation and opening up more of those interfaces. So looking at infrastructure across, core RAN, IT being software-based, but now we're moving towards that common off-the-shelf hardware and possibly workloads running on more of that common hardware platform. And again, here we're thinking disaggregation may not be in all of deployed deployments, but maybe in the majority of planned deployments or upcoming deployments. So breaking down those network functions or those proprietary network stacks into smaller components that may then be able to be run with separate vendors, or may be able to be run in different geographies. So the example we often use with the BBU, breaking that down into the CU, the DU, the RU, running those possibly with different vendors and in different locations. And again, we've taken the jump here into the programmability box. It's very much thinking about modular IT architectures, moving towards more open software best practice. But we're also starting to think here about more agile and cross-domain. And we've put here in brackets the CTIO, because again, one of the key findings from this program, or one of the key points of validation, was the strength of how the strength of a CTIO group can really drive transformation for operators in the move to cloud native. So rather than CTO versus CIO, or where we did speak to some tier one operators where the CTO was very much IT is a different kettle of fish. We can't take best practice from IT because they just don't understand the network. Moving away from that siloed mentality towards more of a CTIO group, where IT may handle some of network architecture, and you get more overlapping capabilities, more synergies, and the move towards more programmability. And then the next step is to become more fully cross-domain, and we've called this modular technology and agile operations, because what was very much stressed through the interview program and the survey was the need for not just a microservice architecture, but that architecture to be common across fixed and mobile, where it can be, to be common across consumer and enterprise propositions. So you have the network split into these modules that can then be flexibly pieced together to create more compelling or differentiated propositions. And the idea that leveraging that or having to build multiple different stacks and for every different product, for every different customer segment, was becoming too arduous and difficult, and it's not as agile. Moving towards more of a microservice-based architecture with these common building blocks would enable operators to actually shift towards as-a-service models and that more flexible networking and dynamic networking that has been promised in that future vision. And of course, here, it may be that you're leveraging multiple cloud platforms, some of which will come from the hyperscalers, some may be more private cloud, but the idea is you're not stuck into one hyperscaler or to one network equipment provider, but instead you've broken out of that and are looking to drive more open best practice. And again, in terms of mapping where operators are then on this journey, we see that almost 70% of operators are still, around that virtualization phase. So 39% saying, yeah, we're probably at or past step one, but actually 31% still saying, well, we're not sure we've actually reached or surpassed stage one yet. So virtualization still being a core focus for the industry and for a lot of the operators that we surveyed. And again, I think this is important in terms of the recommendations, because there is a lot of learnings that can be taken from those operators, the kind of 30% or so that are at step 2 or 3, because I think they've had quite a difficult journey on the route to where they are. There's been a lot of investment, a lot of integration, a lot of testing for not what I think they would say a lot of promised realized gains. Virtualization and disaggregation hasn't brought a huge amount of cost savings on the books for those operators because I think they would say they had limited re-architecting of the functions they were using. They tried to just virtualize as was. There was less modernization, and they probably invested less in the business model transformation side to become more agile and more programmable. So looked at kind of this cloudification angle as something that you buy rather than something that you do. So for those 70% of operators that are still yet to push into stage two and that disaggregation, there's some learning that you can take away to kind of leapfrog what those other operators have done and say, okay, well, actually, we will modernize, we will think about the new business model for driving cloud and the end goal here rather than trying to virtualize legacy functions to get faster efficiency gains through things like SRIOV and DPKs, etc. So those are what we saw as the kind of natural progression within cloudification and programmability. The next step is automation. And I think the reason that we've done it kind of cloud, data, automation, and then automation and exposure is because if I go kind of one back, we think about cloud and we think about data as almost those foundations that enable these other pillars, right? Why would I invest as an operator in automating or in exposing legacy elements of my network? If it's in software, it's easier and it's moved more future-proof. 6G won't come around now for another 8 or so years, right? So this network that we have is if we invest and we move towards virtualized and disaggregated best practice, we can then implement automation on top of a future-proof network rather than investing in doing that for a network that we'll have to swap out sooner or later.